okay, and a little bit late to the gang. And there's nothing as terrible as being late and going through Old Kira Road. Emmanuel Dombo is in the studio, and I'll pass on all the blame to him because he's in charge of the NRM roads. Good morning, Honorable Emmanuel Dombo, and welcome to the Capital Gang.
Good morning, and good morning, our listeners. It's a pleasure for me to be back here again.
Yes. We have another guest in a red, many people say red shirts, because even the owners of red don't wear red shirts these days. Best Raymond Johnny in a Uganda shirt, Uganda Crane shirt, not a red shirt. Do you know there's a difference?
That distinction needs to be very clear because I need to go back home today.
so it is dangerous to be in a red shirt.
Under the new dispensation, it's slightly dangerous to try.
Okay. Honorable Semuju is here in the studio. Most welcome to Gang, Honorable Semuju Nganda. Thank you. You decided what shirt you're wearing, but we are watching you. Oh, which shirt then? Because you're no longer blue, you've not gone to red.
Where do you live?
In Uganda.
PFF is blue and white.
Blue and white.
Yeah.
Right. So let's hopefully soon see blue and white. Honorable Katuntu is in the studio. It's a miracle that he was here before me.
Actually, it offended the protocol. I'm supposed to come in last.
You're most welcome to Gang.
Thanks, Oscar. Good morning, listeners.
And Joseph Otieno, number one UPC fan in the world at this rate. You're most welcome to the Capital Gang.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm putting on a neutral color because this country needs us to throw away so many of other things and come together.
So
for many reasons.
You started with the UPC.
But you brought in UPC. I was actually going to congratulate you, Comrade Sembuju, for your new developments. But
thank you.
Directly in front of me, of course, is my fantastic Mwiri Obi, and flanked by the guy in red.
And you're seated right next to our NRM person.
I hope that raid will be considered genuinely national raid, nothing else. But most importantly, I'm delighted to have
the neighbor from Bukedi,
my brother from Bukedi. But look, you guys, in a future UPC government, we shall review local government and make sure Bukedi becomes one district once again.
So let's start with you, Honorable Katontu, with this act that they have been facing. One of the things, when we start with red, let us take that to the very end. One of the aspects of the legislation is about wearing red hats. Can you imagine?
What is that not to imagine?
You are a senior lawyer, head of that parliamentary committee, and you are going to legislate on the color of a hat.
Yeah, I think that should be put in context, because if we put it like that, it sounds very ridiculous. Yeah.
Sometimes you need to put things like that to see how ridiculous they are.
Anyway, I don't know what question you would like me to answer, really, or you want me to give the summary of what is going on in Parliament. I think that's a better way to put it.
Good.
Yeah. I think currently there is a joint committee that has been set up by the House to consider the Uganda People's Defence Forces Act Amendment of 2025. It is constituted by the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, where I sit and I'm the ranking member, and also the Defence and Internal Affairs Committee, which is the sector committee that deals with the Ministry of Defence and Internal Affairs. Some time back, I think it's over a year ago, the UPDF or the Ministry of Defence had proposed an amendment to the original act, which we enacted in 2005. However, as the committee was considering that act, the Supreme Court came up with that decision regarding the court martial. And in that decision, the Supreme Court made declarations. It also made what we call orders, and also made what I would call advisory orders. Advisory in the sense that the court was of the view that some aspects should be handled by both the executive or the army, the Minister of Defense more specifically, and also Parliament, to have the Uganda People's Defense Act conform to the Constitution of Uganda. It led to the withdrawal of the original bill, which was in Parliament, and then the Minister of Defense tried to get some aspects that touch especially the court martial to bring them in conformity with the new legal order of the Supreme Court. So originally the bill handled so many things, organs of the army, they had been changed. There's one thing which Honorable Semuji has been always talking about the last 4 years, about the status of the Special Forces Command, what is it in the year, and so on. So all those were now being regularized, the reserve forces and so on. But the most important aspect of this bill, in my view, was the welfare of members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces and also those who have retired, the veterans, to have their pension away from public service to the Ministry of Defense. There are so many positive aspects, very, very many positive aspects about this bill. Unfortunately, there is only one issue which has brought everything into public discussion, and that is the way the Act is seeking to implement the court decision, and more specifically about the trial of civilians in the court martial. So that is the controversy which is there. Taken a conscious decision, well thought out decision, that I'm going to participate in this process from day one until it ends to make my positive contribution to the improvement of this law so that it does not come out as it is now. I'm not going to shout at anybody. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to talk whoever is concerned, and I have been in that committee from the first minute up to the end until they close, and I'll be there until this thing ends.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, of course.
and you know, I framed today's topic as the good, the bad, and the ugly, but of the reform. But the good includes overdue reforms regarding pensions for service people, professional courts martial. Those are good things.
Yes, absolutely. For example, pension. The other day we received a group of veterans called the RIF. RIF is RIF. It was a reduction in force in 1992, I think, as a result of the donor demand when they asked the government to reduce the forces. Many of those people had not served the mandatory 10 years in the army, so they would not qualify for the proper pension and so on. And they were getting 7,000 a month.
Shillings?
Yes. But by the time it goes through the banks, the actual is 3,000. That's what they are getting. And these are veterans, and they didn't leave the forces because of age. They didn't leave because they are resigned, but they were cut off. You get some of them thought they needed a career in the military, and they had started serving, but because of the donor demand, they were cut off. And people are getting 3,000, 1, 2, 3. And I'm like, which country is this are we living in? So that is one of the aspects that are being addressed by this bill, and of course with details and so on, how there's a new formula for calculation of the pension, how to look after these guys and so on, which is better for the servicemen. And I think we need to handle a little bit of many other aspects of the bill.
Okay, Honorable Semuju, before we come to Honorable Dombo here, some of the ugly is the of course, Abdu has mentioned it, returning civilians to court, that's part of the agri. But also this bill, the rush around the bill. What is the reason for that?
Yes. Asking because you want an answer.
Yes. We have two active parliamentarians here.
Closer to the approach the Abdu has taken. Around 2000 to 2000 something, when the Honorable Mamba was Minister for Defense, the British sponsored the professionalization of the army. A lot of research was done, leading to the enactment of the UPDF Act that they are now seeking to change. White paper was written, they had meetings. Remember one time, it must have been Andrew Mwenda who reported about those meetings where the generals were standing on table, quarreling over. So eventually the UPDF Act is done. At that time, providing for units and so on and so forth. But I think this one was replacing either the Army Act, something like that. So in one of the meetings of the High Command in Entebbe, at that time the Joint Chief of Staff, I think must have been Robert Erosoke, Brigadier, and as they are concluding this process, whose aim was to build a professional army, discipline, Museveni tells them that I am creating a special force. Erosoke, I am told by the senior officers who were in the meeting, told him, sir, that will undermine everything that we have done. Everywhere you have an elite sort of a force within a force, like the Republican Guards in Iraq, in Iran, and elsewhere, you're creating two standards. And Museveni, after his long lecture, he said, anyway, I was just giving information that we'll have a special force. And eventually the special force, Museveni's protection unity became the special force, growing from 500 when he had just captured power to a brigade, to a division, to now numbers that nobody knows. And I have been complaining because SFC has been operating illegally. They, just for people who are listening, one time when they were doing the organogram of the army, they put the CDF, and then below him put the commanders of the forces, the Air Force and the Land Force, and put SFC. I asked Chiyonga, who was the minister, to tell me, because you had now elevated the SFC to a level of Land Force and Air Force. I asked him the legal status. He said, okay, we'll go and consult and come back. I never came back. So and that brings me, that background was important to bring me to a point that I want to make. That there has always been a desire by Museveni to create an army within an army. And he kept saying it. I remember the Honorable Salam Musumba was chairing a committee on presidential. They went to meet Mr. Museveni in Soroti during the time of Konye. And he told them that, in fact, starting from the beginning, he used to call the UPDF Saleh's army and his army. Then he told them that your army has failed. Now I have deployed my army. Konye is going to be finished. You can ask Salam Musumba and those who are serving on the committee on presidential. So he has always wanted to create an army within an army. I think now he has emerged. So there is only now one army, his army. The one of Saleh, and your army has eventually now been retired. It is now the Museveni army with his son in command. So the point I want to make, Oscar, before I answer the question you asked, is that a lot of money was spent in professionalization of UPDF. There was an attempt to build a national army. That has now gone away. It's gone up in flame. What you now have is the Museveni army, the Saleh army, and UPDF is gone. And the worst thing is that Museveni does things different. Even when he's doing bad things, he doesn't do them recklessly. He leaves room to doubt whether it is him or not. Now his army he has handed over to his son, who thinks that to be a leader must be like a Kagame. who tweets that Kagame has killed more people than I have, I also need to begin killing to match up with my uncle.
Has he actually said that?
He has. And you read that tweet.
No.
He said Kagame had killed over and said, I want to kill more. But is there anything that Mose cannot tweet Oscar for you even to ask whether he has tweeted it? Is there anything? So this
bill
bill
has published today that he wants to tweet you. So
it's okay.
I'm your protector.
So because Museveni has been doing two things: assembling a political infrastructure that creates some false hope, but also building an army for both regional but also internal to do politics. Now, the political infrastructure is slowly being replaced by the military. So the decision is the animal was not these NRM caucuses, the dome was going to Chankwa, so that nonsense is going to stop. So the rush now, first there are two things. You have parliament, the 4 years of parliament, we are ending our 4th year, and there are usually ceremonies and so on and so forth. Budget, state of national address, but also the campaign itself. So everything that you want to do now, you want to rush it before these things begin. So, in fact, I am surprised that they delayed. They were supposed to have passed this long ago. There is NRM caucus in Entebbe on Monday. Because some of the MPs are also uncomfortable because they know Museveni. I've told you Museveni is like a lion. When he's angry, he will eat anything around him. So sometimes if it is Semuju, but Semuju is in Chazanga. If it is you around, you will be the one to be devoured by Museveni. So the rush is partly because of that. But also, I think Museveni looks now at Parliament as a machine. When you switch it off, so you don't have to waste your time, because he doesn't think that MPs are going to read this law and pass it because they have understood it. They're going to pass it because he has switched them on. So you guys pass my law.
Let's go to Mr. Emmanuel Dombo. Semuju is against the bill without actually quoting.
Yeah, but if you allow me a second, and I hope the Abdus will, because I don't understand why the reserve force should become now a force. Are you guys going to pay the soldiers who are, because the reserve force as it is today, it has soldiers who have retired. You're now going to make it formal in the law.
You will answer that.
So you're going to give them money.
You give an answer. So for you, I need to ask some aspects of the bill, seeking to make a monopoly over plain ordinary suits and choosing colors and having an ordinance on that.
The beret is okay. It's yellow in the law.
Well, the boots are also theirs, and do these things need a debate?
Oscar, I want first and foremost to thank my colleagues, especially the current members of Parliament, and Honorable Abudu Katuntu. I've listened to him on TV, and he has just made the public declaration here that he wants to use his vintage position in age, experience, and also knowledge in the law, so that he helps Parliament come up with a good law. That's what members of Parliament are supposed to do. And for the period I was in Parliament, we always attempted to do that. But the coming of this law is, first of all, the law that is being amended. You have heard the Honorable Semuju telling you that even the professionalization of the army was funded by our colonial masters. Why? Because of our inability to raise the funds, because of lack of professional competencies at that time. NRA was a ragtag army which was formulated in the bush and came and overtook government, and now they had professionalized. Professionalization considers a number of things, including the training, the equipment, but also the administration and structure of the army. I'm very sure if we had the resources that we have now as a country, perhaps at that time, all the things that Honorable Semuju is talking about could have been taken into consideration. But also, we are not in a static world. We're in a world where technology is changing, where the problems and the enemies we're dealing with are changing and reformatting. Therefore, there is no way you're going to have a static law and a static nature of running an institution like the military at a time when the other parliamentary forces may also want to emerge within the country. Then the final thing which nobody is trying to address, which I want to mention here before I talk about the uniforms, is that the onus or the responsibility usually, once a president has been sworn in, there are some political actors who want to treat President Museveni and the NRM as if we are constantly in competition with the other parties that are not in government.
That's how you present.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Because immediately the president wins an election and the party takes over the administration and government is allowed to fund the manifesto of the party using the taxpayers' money. Now the responsibility of maintaining public order in the country shifts to the hands of what they would call their opponent, who has a direct responsibility to ensure that order must be maintained. And this is the order which some of the people wanted to discredit, because until now, this is one of the strongest points which Uganda shows around. That's why you see refugees running from all these countries which are very stable and coming back here to the country. So because President Museveni and the NRM administration has a responsibility of maintaining stability in the country, it will use the instruments that are available to it, including legislation to ensure that public order is maintained, to ensure that there is sanity in the country, and to ensure that the people of Uganda are protected and they enjoy the peace and everything that they want. But in order to do that, they must do it conscious that we have an elected parliament, which is the representative of the people and must have ample time to deal with the law in accordance with the constitution, but also in accordance with other laws that exist, including taking into consideration court judgments which have been done. Now, the way I look at this law is that many people have stopped reading the the bill and what has been proposed, and they have reduced it to a political contestation. I've been listening to a number of talk shows from various media stations, and I've listened to people argue that this bill is targeting, when you talk about the Kaunda suits and the red berets, that's purely targeting no and targeting the other. It's the responsibility of the members of parliament to ensure that they make it in such a way that even if it was the NRM that came up tomorrow with berets that offend the law, then the law takes charge of that. Why should it only be seen as if the law is targeting National Unity Platform when we have people like Katutu who are in parliament and they can ably rely on the history but also their knowledge and wisdom to ensure that we make a universal law which must apply to the members of the National Resistance Movement just as to the members of the National Platform or any other.
Yeah, but you know there's been a history of this, especially within the NRM government. You remember the case of Amama Mbabazi, how his own law caught him out eventually. So when you have laws that are targeting people, they might eventually end up with you.
Members of parliament don't get immune against the traffic laws even when they pass the traffic laws. If they become members of parliament and they drive carelessly, the very tax laws which they drive, which they have made, will definitely get hold of them. I have my brother, who was my friend and personal doctor, Dr. Bulamu, who are in parliament with the late Dr. Bulamu, and we made a law about authorizing verification of the papers. Well, with him the previous day for higher education, certifying the papers if you did not go through the HSC system in Uganda. After he passed the law, he went back home prepared for nominations and never went for certification. And when he came for nomination, and coming for nomination on the last day,
with his Russian degree,
he was reminded that the law had been passed, and he said, yes, I attended and we passed the law. I said, but you have not certified. And he was struck off. I think his opponent passed and opposed.
No, there were many others, but
he was
what happened? Because you see, he went for nomination the last day. And he was in Iganga. And the certification takes around 2-3 days.
In Kampala.
In Chambugu.
So, I've had this argument, especially from members of the opposition. I want to remind everybody that when you go to make a law in parliament, you make a law for the people of Uganda, and once that law gets you, even when you have left parliament, or when you are still there, you are not immune because you are a member of parliament. There are some liberties that are within the liberties of members of parliament. You don't be arrested when you are going to parliament. You be arrested, they must notify the speaker. Those are privileges that are extended to members of parliament. At times they don't work, but the law is universal to every Ugandan, and let the Katutus consolidate the law so that whether it is a member of NRM, whether it is a member of the opposition, once you are caught on this offside of the law should take hold of you.
Yeah, but Oscar, I think my brother Emmanuel is missing the point. What is the people's cause? I didn't even start with the Right Honorable Mama. It started even in the 60s. During the time of the deportations and so on, and then the arrest of the famous cabinet arrest of ministers from cabinet. The principle is make a law in good faith.
Yeah.
That's the principle. If you make a law in bad faith, fate has it that it may end up with you. That's what the concern. That's the concern of the people. Make a law in good faith. Don't make a law which touches Rumala, because tomorrow you never know. You could be in Rumala's position, and if you have made that law in bad faith, then fate has caught up with you. Yeah. I think that is the point you're trying to make.
That's a good point for you to come in, Raymond, because I see you as a conscientious thinker. Whatever Honorable Dombo might say, a lot of people will think, in addition to what Honorable Semujwa said, that there's a rush because they want to get someone like Dr. Kiza Besigye to that court. So rush is important. Describing the attire and the colors, that one is targeting a political party that is about to start campaigns. And then there's a challenge by the Uganda Law Society and the East African Court of Justice on it. So, but when you have this kind of rush, all these things are suspect. Would you agree?
Definitely. My understanding and the reason the law itself is coming up is that the Supreme Court challenge is the one that led us here. But I think it's folly of us to imagine that the political realities today are only starting now. I mean, if I look back when our friends in UPC were in government, they created, out of the Ugandan Army, they created something called the General Service Unit. That General Service Unit eventually became the State Research Bureau, which clamped down on many of the political operatives of the UPC. If I look back from the UPC and say the Buganda Kingdom, I think some of the first kings, the Mwangas, created the Bamboa, and there was even a distinction between Islamic Bamboga and Christian Bamboga, and that led to the overthrow of Mwanga himself. So I would advise our politicians to look into our political history, because our political history is very instructive. Tomorrow the FDC might come into power and use the Very Special Forces Command to rain terror on members of the NRM. So for us who are civilians and citizens who don't belong to the political class, oftentimes you struggle with the political class and you struggle with their understanding of history and where we are going. But you also struggle with the understanding of the realities that they live in. I think we can't deny that we are within the political reality that a transition is happening. How it happens, whether it happens constitutionally or extra-constitutionally, outside the judicial processes is a matter that's out of our hands. So because of that murky transition, we have been led into this politics where factions fighting for power are exercising, each of them is exercising their power separately. Some people have social power and they're exercising that. Other people have military power, they're exercising that. Other people have political power, they're exercising that. And the people for whom these things are visited upon, like us, the civilians, tomorrow morning, for example, I'm not sure if I should wear black boots. I'm not sure if I should ask my OC station, are these shoes fit to walk? Those things affect the general civilian populations of Uganda. So a law, whether you make a law that targets Abdu Katuntu, at the end of the day it will tame the behavior of Raymond and tame the general behavior of everyone. But I also immediately realized that I watched the Attorney General yesterday make some concessions. One of those concessions is that the army has agreed that insignia of the army is what will determine what constitutes military stores. So whether it's boots that you're wearing, they must be boots that have the insignia of the UPDF. Whether it's the military uniform you're wearing, you must have insignia on it that's a military uniform. And the law itself has, I think, an appendix that shows you that insignia.
You're saying if it has the army insignia, that's the one that will be illegal?
Yes, that will fall into military stores. But until we can see that in the law, because the law as is written now doesn't reflect that, until that is added into the law, we still have to wait. But also, maybe to say, this fight between the army or the people that have military control and civilians, it looks like it's a fight that has plagued Ugandan states for years. The first states within this civilization we call Uganda, Buganda, for example, struggled a lot between the militaries of Buganda and the civilians who were living in Buganda. My own kingdom, where I come from, as you know this, Oscar, we seceded from Bunyoro Kingdom, and we had 9 years of contentious military battles with the Bunyoro Kingdom and the Abarusura. The British Army, when they came here, they used the force of the King's African Rifles to force Buganda Kingdom into an agreement. Then they used the Nubians to force the Ankole and Toro kingdoms into agreement. So it looks like it's an outstanding fight between militaries and civilians. And I think it's a defining political moment in Uganda's history. So I want to advise our politicians to step back and say, this is not politics as usual. This is a defining moment. It is not true that if the civilians win over the military, even in parliament, that the military will respond. And I think we've seen that before. In 1966, for example, the civilians had their day and the military responded. And when it responded, we was...
Raymond, even now, the military has responded to the last time when the court martial was declared illegal.
Exactly.
But they've not released the people who were convicted. So.
Exactly. And I struggle also because when I look around other countries, I see countries like Egypt, which have now gone into almost their 12th year of military dictatorship. I see countries like Sudan now split. I think there is a country called Sudan, but the contestation there has continued. This is
all because the military persisted.
Yes. So I don't know if we have, our skilled politicians, someone should be able to say this is a defining political moment. Let us first put away our political differences and deal with it as you would for the future of Ugandans. Because I'm 31, I might be in this country for the next 30 years, and I wouldn't want...
Looking around this table, you might live a little bit longer.
Yes. I wouldn't want to have 10 or 15 years in which we go back to having a military contestation over political affairs. So I think we need a defining political moment, and if this is the defining political moment, then we need to put aside some differences. And we need to understand some realities which exist. So, for example, I don't think that you can wish away the Special Forces Command. I don't think you can. Even though their problems with the constitution of the Special Forces Command or its leadership. I think looking at Uganda's neighbors and how all of them have their own separate special forces, it's unlikely that you can wish away an elite force. I also don't think that you can wish away the general. So
it's clear that you can't will not have that special force. That
That
will be that will not
it is there.
Yeah, so you can't wish. Yes, you can't wish it away because military science has evolved now. Even the advanced democracies have their own special forces command. You have the UK with their Green Berets, you have the US with their Navy SEALs. You can't wish that away, that there will be an elite command within the army that responds to the realities of that army. So those are some of the concessions that can be made. But I don't think that on things like military wear, I think there should be some concessions there. I think those are concessions where civilians can say it should be okay to wear a beret. You shouldn't feel bad if you find a civilian wearing a beret.
Yes. I want to bring in Joseph. You speak after him, but let's ask Joseph, because Joseph, when they talk about the attire, they don't mean your red, the UPC red, because even UPC has not decided on what red it is now. Abdu,
it's the original red, yeah.
Originally, he no longer has any of that, Abdu. But what I've noticed in a little document, there's a pair of shoes that's described as military wear. And I know that Abdu has 4 pairs of those.
I don't think he has this ceremony. This is a ceremony.
Only yesterday, Abdu, only yesterday I was telling people that this very special shoes of mine, which I've not put on for a long time, Kumbe, is in crisis. But in carry on, sir. Yes, I do have one.
You also have a pair.
Yeah.
For me, they're a little bit uncomfortable, so I no longer have them. At my age, I like.
Mine is Clark's, very nice.
Yeah. So, how will this end, like this? Joseph or Cheno? How is this going to end?
I don't know. I have just been slightly worried by
the Emmanuel Dombos have numbers, so they can pass it.
They can have numbers until cows come home, but the Republic of Uganda shall reclaim itself. And in any case, part of the conversation that I think nearly everybody has been going and leading towards is that you create these situations and they come home to bite you. NRA has had its time. It's its 40th year. NRA will not, I repeat, NRA will not in 20 years' time be the force or the power that they so think they are, especially and unless they choose to remoderate, review. And the other day I was having a dream, by the way. I was having a dream that I wish once upon a time in the near future that Ugandans sat together and that we reviewed our polity, that for even UPC, which is a pure Republican social democratic political party, that even UPC has once upon ever had an opportunity to coalesce with other political parties and review and reform. That is actually possible, that guys in NRA can wake up, get delivered, and then rejoin the mainstream of democratic struggles for their peoples. So that is actually possible. So no, they will not remain the same like that. And that's why I am rather concerned by the observations coming from my young friend from NUP that special forces should I said NUP deliberately, should not be washed away. The special forces of UK, the special forces of US, if that is the way the special forces under NRA were operating, we would not be having this conversation. In any case, historically, when we're trying to refer to these forces, and I think my brother here referred to the question of the General Service Unit of the 60s. The General Service Unit of the 60s was very specifically designed as part of nation building, intelligence detection work for crime prevention in a civilized new emergent democracy. It was not designed for anything else, and that the British and friends of Museveni came in and brought in Idi Amin, and then the Amin created whatever happened. You can't blame the party and the government that was forming. Number two, I was also in another forum the other day, and somebody from NRM, very senior, massively misunderstood what the special forces that existed in Uganda in the 80s was. It was actually police special forces, and it was a paramilitary, and was deliberately designed to fight insurgents at the time. The insurgents at the time were the NRA guys in the bushes. And part of what, and I had this conversation with Milton about it, part of the conversation was the creation of special forces. It took a huge amount of conversation. The idea was a struggling police force. You want to operate within the rule of the law. Where is the army? Where is their capacity? Where do you still want to make sure that, well, you fight insurgency, you fight crime, but still do so in such a manner that the forces in question are people who are coming from law enforcement background, but with slightly much more capacity than the police. And that's all the way, So they were not this. But number two, this special forces thing here is basically what Ibrahim said. We told you that this guy was constituting a new army by mobilizing from a presidential protection unit, which is what we had in the 80s, merely presidential protection unit for the president, the vice president, and top diplomats. The head of the presidential protection unit was initially actually captain. The guy died a major and only elevated as a lieutenant colonel. Now it's an whole army. So the nature of the conversation completely changes. But on the army legislation, quickly, Abdul, you'll be interested to know that UPC and I contributed to some of the early changes of this armed forces legislation at the time. As soon as NRA came, we were quite concerned that they were not a ragtag, because they were not. Museveni, by the time they were going to the push, they had mobilized many people, and so they were a big force. And whatever the case, they had joined together with the Okellos, and they're a very bad group of people in any case. But the NRA ones were looking very good and trying to impress Ugandans. They were decent people. But predominantly they had 10 little boys, 10 little girls, kadogos. I was one of those people who pushed at the British, pushed the Americans, pushed the EU. It's official, by the way, that in Uganda, my country, that has actually chased me into exile. It's being controlled by an army which basically abused young people, a child soldier thing. So two things that emerged, and Ibrahim, you can see how I'm smiling. I take credit that partly because of that, Museveni managed to take some of these little boys and girls back to school, to give them an element of hope. But part of that was that the abuse that Abdul was talking about was addressed. But we don't want to forget the fact that in 1980, Mr. Museveni's campaign, DP was talking, UPC was talking, CP was talking. Mr. Museveni's campaign slogan was that we want to democratize the gun. So the democratization of the gun was Museveni's agenda as of UPM. And Emmanuel, you may not necessarily remember this.
But it was important.
So I don't know what if
sometimes when you go back and reminisce on the UPC days and special forces, you leave out how you generated fear. And I saw the way Abdul was looking at you.
I'll have some.
Oscar, the democratization of the gun campaign of Mr. Museveni
was to make us less fearful.
No.
And a lot of people went to, what was it called? Chakam Chaka. And said, from now on, it was a case, Joseph, maybe you never understood.
No, I did very well.
Stop fearing the gun. Okay.
So in other words, all the people who did that, including Ibrahim, could be argued, really contributed to the mess in which we are. That now that the army is in the pocket of a man and his son, and every other day, including fueling at a petrol station, you've got to be pushed aside by somebody with a car.
You will admit that at the end of UPC time, we were in a mess, we were fearful.
What I was talking about, no, actually, that I never will. That I never will admit. But let me tell you this. The democratization of the gun campaign was actually the same in 1980. By then, UPC wasn't in government. Museveni was Minister for Defense. The first thing he mentioned, actually, that's why he switched me over to Mwiri, which was during the election campaign, or what had just returned a few weeks earlier, democratizing the gun. So it was not about democratizing.
Is spoiling a very good debate.
No, I'm not.
You are not responsible for the crimes committed under the old UPC.
Yeah.
Please don't appropriate them.
I am trying to give context.
They are unforgivable. We have relatives who disappeared.
No, you've talked about it, and we shall discuss this issue of relatives.
Don't appropriate the crimes.
Do you know what?
Speak about Uganda, how we can make it better. But to remind us of UPC that you are better than NRM.
Do you know, I actually find it extraordinary, Semoju. Your relatives disappeared, as you said, as you allege, and they would have disappeared. They would have disappeared, and I'm really sorry. Under UPC administration, in which UPC government, elected government, the last elected government, by the way, since 1980, the last democratically elected government was UPC, and since the time that government was fighting, as Emmanuel was referring to an insurgency, a band in the bush. I'm giving context. So the idea of democratizing the gun way back in 1980 has meant that Museveni has militarized everything and power since then until today. So basically what we're trying to discuss at the moment is a confirmation of that. That's really what I was trying to refer to. That's what I was trying to take you at. But that said, I also agree. I also agree that this question of the AG coming back to the question of insignia, I think it's a common sense clamp down. That I had been wondering that how on earth could you say that you immediately put on some red stuff and my fantastic black shoes, you're in contest with the army. So I think it's a welcome one, as an important that's been noted. So I'm saying some of what is happening at the moment, they're quite clearly common sense. But if you look at the legislation, I think Abdul was talking about, it is impossible not to believe that this thing is being pushed in a bad timing and in bad faith, and the idea is to add fear. The idea is to make sure that we perfect the military arrangement at the moment, and to make sure that Mr. Museveni and his army gets away with it in the absence of, at the expense of democracy in our country.
I have Nora Oraga on X saying, yes, other nations have elite armies that were from the onset established by law. Please let us not get into the tradition of explaining away illegalities. BMK Gift says, why the rush? Honorable Semoju explained that. Another listener said, correct. Joseph, Raymond is not NUP. We don't know if he is, but he's recently back from...
I am not.
No.
I'm not a candidate.
Raymond and I were having a discussion from the beginning about the raid that he was putting on, and you can imagine.
Let me commend him. He's recently back from a stint at a high-end university in the UK, so we want to see him cleverer.
Yes.
But Abdul, before we stop for this break, talk about those pair of shoes and what you're going to do with them. Is it 3 or 4 pairs?
There are so many things. You need to look at the act itself, what it has, the bill, what has provided 100, and just 1 second, I think it is provided for 106 pictures of what should constitute military.
Is that normal when you're presenting a bill, even include pictures?
Oh yes, because they are gazetted ones, so that the public knows that these are now part of the stores. We have objections to quite a number, and having that conversation with the Learned Attorney General yesterday in the committee, he seemed to have agreed with us on 1 or 2, 3 issues. We are going to be examining one by one to see which one should be a monopoly really of the UPDF. Because you see, Oscar, there are things we have been wearing. We don't want the UPDF to come and grab them from us because they have been part of the civilian attire and so on. However, I'll give you an example. When you look at pictures 53, 54, 55, 56, these are their ranks. You get it? Of lieutenant generals, these red things with the yellow gold linings in between them. Yeah, these are really ranks of the UPDF, and I don't think civilians should be using them. I mean, because we want to enact a law, but also with common sense. You get it? You can't enact a law for purposes of politics. It doesn't make sense to me. So there are things really which we think should be the UPDF monopoly. And we've examined everything, like their ranks.
Carton, let me just stop you there. We stop for a break, and then I'll give you a bit more time after the break. I do know that the Attorney General also owns a pair of shoes like yours.
And we have had a discussion, and actually when we are asking the members of the UPDF with us, all of them said, maybe that one, let's discuss it later, because it was not justifiable under any circumstances.
Let's stop for a break.
The Capital Gang on 91.3 Capital FM.
Moments fade, but memories last forever. At X Events, we capture your life's biggest moments, from weddings, introductions, giveaways, documentaries, short films, and corporate shoots, with a state-of-the-art equipment and a team of dedicated professionals that ensure that every moment is captured with precision and creativity. We are located at Access Building, Rubaga Road. For bookings, call or WhatsApp 0708 002222. X Events, capturing your precious moments.
Malaria remains a major public health challenge in our country. Every day, 16 people die from malaria. Sadly, 10 of them are children under 5 years. But now, there is good news. The government has introduced a powerful new tool in the fight against malaria, the malaria vaccine. The malaria vaccine is now part of the routine immunization schedule and is given in 4 doses at 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, and 18 months of age. This vaccine gives your child great protection against severe malaria, even death, helping them grow stronger, healthier, and happier. Remember, immunization protects children from many deadly but preventable diseases. Visit your nearest health facility and have your child immunized against malaria and learn more about other immunizable diseases. Remember, all children should be vaccinated at least 9 times before their 2nd birthday. The vaccines are free, safe, and life-saving. For more information, call the Ministry of Health toll-free line on 0800 100 066 or send a free SMS to UReport on 8500. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health with support from partners.
Capital Gang on 91.3 Capital FM.
We'll come back from the break. An interesting discussion in the break, still on the proposed amendments. Honorable Katontu, you are describing what's acceptable and what may not be
for
acceptable.
example, they bring kaunda suits. So long as the kaunda suit is of these blues, there are 2 blues here, then there's a coffee kaunda suit here, and so on. These are ordinary colors and kaundas that have been worn by people. So we want to see the logic of the UPDF monopolizing a coffee kaunda. No, kaunda is defined like a matching top and so on. Really, there are some things which we will have to change. They also go to gumboots, for example, and there is a green gumboot here, I think. And they said that is now a monopoly of the UPDF. You cannot be seen, just an ordinary gumboot, which people are wearing all over the place and so on. So I think we need to look at this. There are other sections, Oscar, which are quite important. And I've asked this question. When you look at clause 7 of the bill, it provides that members of the High Command on the 26th of January 1986, whose names are set out on Shade 3 to this Act, provided that the member has not been convicted of any criminal offense or charged or changed citizenship or has not joined active partisan politics, they will be members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces High Command. And I'm saying, first of all, it is bad legislation to legislate for particular individuals that Emmanuel Odombo will be a member of the High Command until he dies. It doesn't make common sense. Because this is not even military. This is not law. It is not common sense.
But when you take it further, what if they all die? Then there's no High Command.
No. There are others. It's a category.
Okay.
And my suggestion is, read in good faith, many of these people played a role, especially in the war that brought the NRM to power. We've since then awarded them medals. They have since then retired. They are now old men. The NRA at that time has since then metamorphosized into what we call the UPDF. Allow these gentlemen and ladies to rest. They are in their retirement. They can now not be burdened but because they participated in this struggle, they can't be burdened with army responsibility until they die. Just imagine somebody is being lucky enough to live up to 100 years. And he comes from Karamoja, in a sea, it said he's come to attend a high command meeting. It doesn't make sense to me. So we are speaking something for the interest of the army and for the interest of we have now new young people, men and women, professional lawyers, whatever professional, who are managing the army currently. Let them carry their responsibility. Those people who played their role, they did. The country has awarded them. We've given them very good pension. The generals were given very good ex gratia when they were leaving. Those who have retired, let them go do farming, look after their great grandchildren. They have lives to live after the army. So that is one of the areas we are looking. I am thinking I should bring the attention of my colleagues to. Then,
if you look at it the other way, the design of the law might be to keep them as members of the service until they pass on.
No,
because
there is another.
Them outside of service.
No. That one, it is covered for under clause 3, which talks of the reserve force, clause 2 actually. Because, that is a pool. These guys who have served, ex-servicemen, that is a pool from which you can pull the reserve force as and when they are needed. But they are retired. You get, so that is catered for, not this particular one. Then, Oscar, when we go to this contentious thing about the court martial, because everybody is court martial, and so on. This bill, there are around 80-something clauses, and the court martial has only 4. Only 4. So, but they seem to be the most important for public discussion. 2, we are now providing that there is going to be a cross appeal now. That decisions of the general court martial will not end in the court martial. It can now be appealed to the civilian courts. We had the debate whether you are from the general court martial, you appeal to the high court or the court of appeal. Because eventually the bill was appointing the court of appeal. And that we agree in principle that now the general court martial will not be the end of people who are being prosecuted in the court martial. You can appeal to the ordinary courts.
For service officers?
Yes, all offenses. And that's what it should be. Because you see, one, you move out of a system which, if you say, I have been unfairly treated by this system, prosecuted and so on. So let us have the second chance of examining what the military court system did. And at the appellate level, not trial level. Okay. Oscar, that means that if a general court martial takes a decision, that decision is appealable to the court of appeal, where 3 judges will look into it. And even that, we are providing that automatic right of appeal to the Supreme Court. That is an innovation now, because it hasn't been there.
But maybe, Honorable Abdul, on the clauses that concern the General Court Martial, I don't have it off head, but I was reading it. There's a clause there on the exceptional circumstances a civilian can be tried.
Yes.
I think a sub-clause should be added to explain clearly what exceptional circumstances are, because if it remains an open and vague,
and that's what the courts decided. Yes. Actually, they say that civilians to be, by the way, contrary to what people say, the court did not say that civilians cannot be tried by the court martial. It didn't say that. Actually, it said it is possible. However, it said it is only in rare exceptional circumstances. So the burden we have now is to define the clear exceptional circumstances as envisaged by the Constitution, but also taking into account the court decision.
However,
because they went into details.
However, Abdul, is there any situation that the regular courts cannot charge a civilian?
Which one?
Is it necessary to go to the court martial? Doesn't a regular court cover everything?
Okay, no. Let's do this. First of all, court martials are not unique to Uganda. All professional armies all over the world have court martials. So it is about the universality. It is there. Because this is a unique institution, Oscar. and I want us to appreciate it. The circumstances where, for example, when you aid and abet, I don't know whether when I say aiding and abetting, I'm speaking English or law.
Yes, you're speaking English.
Both. Okay. If, for example, Oscar, there is a Major Lumala who is committing a service offense, and a certain civilian Abdul Katuntu has aided Major Lumala in the commission of and abetted this case, the commission of the case, then of the offense, then you cannot have double trials. That you get Katuntu, you take them to a civilian court on the same facts, then you get Lumala, you take him to the military. So when you aid and abet, let me tell you, that could take you to the other side.
I assume the risk.
You get it. However, to me, that is not my concern. My concern and everybody's concern should be weaponizing the court-martial. You see, we are going into this conversation and we miss out, Oscar, the complaint. The complaint is, and I pleaded with the UPDF officers who are there, that they are the ones causing us all these problems. Because they have now weaponized the court-martial. If there's a problem with the Semuju here, they will manufacture something which takes Semuju to what? To the court-martial.
By
the way, Blue is here also now. So, Oscar, that is, in law we call it the mischief. That's where the mischief is. That the court-martial has failed to do what it's supposed to do under the law, and it has been weaponized to handle sometimes political problems. That's where the problem is. It is not about the law, whether the civilians here and so on and no. And if the court-martial can do what we call soul searching, so we have caused this problem because of ABCD. So they should just be more professional. The good news is all these guys are lawyers, well-trained lawyers. You get it? And we are asking them to act professionally. Oscar, the court-martial has always been there, by the way.
Yeah.
But why is it that it is even of late that we have a public uproar? Because of late, they have really degenerated into a political institution. And that's where the problem is. But once they act professionally, I don't think we'll have some of these problems we are seeing today.
Honorable Semuju,
yeah, you see,
coming to you.
Yeah.
Before I take umbrage on what Abdu is saying, that the court can consider for itself, whereas we have MPs that should consider and determine. Angela Izama posts here that the main issue is the extent of civilian oversight over the army. How does this bill speak to this issue? And gives an example. Does it also matter that military leaders continue to disregard lawful orders from civilian authorities? Is your discussion in Parliament looking at that? Then my other question to you is, Abdul has pointed out very in legalese way what we should worry about.
Well, I was speaking plain English. Yeah, there's nothing legalese about this.
Yeah, but I could ask Semuju directly, for you, what is there, without going back into the other history and relating to what's there, what should we be scared of from this?
You see, the context, Oscar, here is very important. Mr. Museveni, even at the beginning of this parliament, he was persuading NRM MPs to change the constitution to remove bail. In the meetings they had with him, some of them, by the way, spoke very well and forcefully. They told him under the constitution, you are the only one who cannot be arrested. All of us are candidates. We are therefore not going to allow you to remove bail, and then you begin, and God is very good. Within a few months, you had NRM MPs arrested that they were soliciting money during budget processing. One of them actually who spoke forcefully before Museveni, I'm not even sure whether Museveni was not revenging on him. The Honorable Akamba. He gets arrested. after getting arrested, court grants him bail, and is grabbed by by people who are in civilian. Later Museveni said he's the one who had ordered. And I think it was very good that the NRM MPs got to be treated that way. Can you imagine Kutana going to court asking bail, and he says, the way I see the weather outside.
The weather outside is not.
I'm not going to process bail.
The clouds were.
Yes, I'm not going to process bail. So on that occasion, the NRM, but the point I'm making, Oscar, is that the context is that Museveni doesn't want bail given. So if he doesn't want bail given, these courts are under immense pressure to give bail. So the only court that is not under pressure is the military court. And then two, he was accusing these ordinary courts of delays. And he wanted to create an alternative justice where they try you very quickly. Like basically you are supposed to have been tried in 2 weeks and sentenced to death. Since then, when they told them you transfer the file to civilian court, they don't have evidence. We are in a car when they were applying, we need BSG's phone to begin correcting evidence. So which means in court martial, they did not need evidence. They are just going to convict him. So that context must, because that's the intention. Sometimes I'm told in courts of law, even the intention of the framers becomes part of the processing. The judges will look at the intention. What was the intention? So Oscar, having said that, I'm coming quick. So the other aspect that Honorable Abdul spoke about of the NRM people who are supposed to be members of the High Command, I have seen they have made a change here, which is good. That to be, if you are in Ruwero and you're a member of High Command, you remain High Command till you die. They have said, if you have not changed the citizenship. Do you know that in the law, we had Ruwejema. First, he was dead, but two, he has also gone to Rwanda. But he was part of the High Command, and Kagame was part of the council. So they are citizens of another country, but they are members of the structures of our military, just because they are in the world fighting. Then coming
and
to
at some time we've been at loggerheads with the other country.
Yeah. So coming to the issues that we should worry.
Is Mugisha Muntu also a member?
Yeah, Mugisha Muntu is a member of the council.
That's a tricky question.
Is a member of the council, not the High Command, but a member of the council. I think now they have said he will no longer be, because they said if you participate in partisan politics, they move you.
He excessively uses
the points Abdu mentioned here, we deal with the context even in the application of the law. Abdu, as our former Shadow Attorney General, was in a meeting with Rugunda and Nanda, people who were leading us in Parliament at that time, to try to interpret sections of the Public Management Act that deliberately Kaihura was misinterpreting to say he has powers to grant permission to hold a rally and so on and so forth. But the debate didn't start with the interpretation. We warned everybody during the consideration of the law in Parliament that the moment you pass it the way it is, we are in trouble. They said, no. And they spoke very well. That, no, you see, it happens everywhere. In the UK, they also regulate rallies, what. That universality is always applied by mafia to make everybody believe that their motivation is not bad. And the law was made. Thank God I was dragged out of Parliament by police. They were referring me, Mama Mbabas wanted me to be taken to the disciplinary committee, and I thank God that the very first person to be arrested under the public management was Mama Mbabas.
I have Kaseja here saying, don't be duped by those good things in the bill.
Yeah, so the intention for me, it doesn't matter what, the moment you give them something to hang on, even if it is one word, not even a sentence, that is civilian in exceptional circumstances, even if you define them, now you'll begin quarreling with them. But this one does not follow in the category that is in the law. So let's civilian. Oscar, I was helping Brigadier Sevaga to write his autobiography. He told me under the Uganda, I don't know, the one of Obote was which army? The first Obote government.
Uganda Army. The independence government.
Yes.
The independence government, but the independence government. Uganda Army.
Brigadier Sewaga told me they faced an insurgency in Rwenzori. And he said we went to put off and put down that rebellion. But as a standard procedure, we're also moving with the police unit in our area. Each insurgent that we arrested, we are handing over to police because they are the ones who are responsible for that. As early as that, that's how the army was behaving. Where is the appetite that 40, 60 years later, you can't do things that were done at independence? And Brigadier Sewaga is there, ask him.
The enemy has changed. Everything has changed.
So Vestige is worse than people who are in Rwenzori holding guns. So really, this thing is Oscar, the intention is not that they want to fight crime. The intention is that they now must clamp down on the opposition. That's why stupid things are found their way in the law. Kaunda suit, boots. Really, in this century, Dombo, in other countries, even military uniform are sold in, and people put them on.
Yeah.
For you, the universality is in what?
Even the guns, some countries.
Yeah, so NRM MPs, Oscar, all of them, they were in Chankwans. Museveni gave them 2 sets of uniform. They are to
get ready.
And you leave all NRM MPs, ministers have 2 sets of UPDF, not even, they have the one of training and the ceremonial uniform. You saw the minister, Lilian Abe. She was putting on a uniform like the one of SFC.
Did she say she had borrowed?
It doesn't matter whether you have borrowed. You saw my friend Mwenda putting on a uniform. Why do you arrest people of Bered and then you don't arrest Mwenda? You don't arrest Lilian Abe. You don't arrest all the NRM MPs. If you raided them, I can tell you, they all returned with those uniforms. So the issue is not that these guys are troubled by people possessing military store or military. They simply want to deal with the opposition, but pretending that everybody does.
Raymond, what should
even
we worry?
Even Dombo has a uniform. He was in the Chankwans. This one here.
Well, Raymond, I'll tell you more about the General Service Unit.
Yes.
Dombo has a military uniform. This one, he should be arrested after the show.
It's a very interesting outfit.
He has 2 pairs.
But I don't know whether he got 2, but I am sure he has one because I saw him in a uniform in the Chankwans.
You know, he doesn't know that when I was in Champas, I was a little bit smaller.
I don't think it becomes illegal if it's not fitting you.
But his shoes, he has the shoes as well. So I can confirm that he does have.
Yes.
The uniform he has also.
And 2 pairs of shoes. Yeah.
Military.
Ofono Pondo has many.
Maybe Oscar, the question we need to ask is...
Oscar, can we borrow me and you?
No, I don't know.
I wanted to say, maybe we should go back
has a military
to
number,
probe
so
the politics.
He's a reserve force.
The politics behind the law. I think that's where the heart of the debate is. I don't think in the history of Uganda ever that the collapse of a political order has left the military order. So everywhere the political order has collapsed, the military order has followed. So both parties need each other. Our politicians need the army needs our politicians. So now we need to probe the politics. I hear us say things like we need to depoliticize the UPDF. In its conception, from the get-go, it's a very political army. So how are we going to achieve that depoliticization? Where are the limits of the depoliticization? I think those are the contentious political debates that we need to have. Somebody needs to ask the probing question. If you're the founding father of the UPDF, I mean, yes.
So we have a new constitutional order. Yes, it is true. The NRA was NRA.
Yeah.
But from 1995, we have a new constitutional order, and it clearly defines that.
That's the law.
Unfortunately, yes, unfortunately,
they've been singing ideology and
yes.
You see, people who are committing a crime in Ruwero, overthrowing a government. for overthrowing a government, they became members of the High Command and put their names in the law.
And they're boasting.
Yeah.
That's
That they had
political
served the
outcome.
army in the government.
Go on, Raymond.
So the bigger worry for me is that one, that we have democratic aspirations, like Abdul Katuntu has mentioned, with our constitutions. But when our political realities show up, all these laws look like fanciful things that we have on the books. And I think the political debate would help for people to say, can we settle this matter once and for all? If the army wants to participate in politics, to what end do you want to participate? Where are the limits? If the civilians want the army to stop at specific areas within political engagement, where are those limits? But I think for as long as the founding father of the UPDF is still a participating partisan politician, it's unlikely that you can detach our army from the politics. And because we can't detach our army from the politics, we now have to deal with it as it is in our politics. We can't wish it away. Maybe to point them to other areas where armies have been deeply involved in politics and say, have those societies become necessarily better societies? Have we learned any lessons from there? And many people in the NRM, I think Mr. Dombo here, the NRM signed a political alliance with the Chinese Communist Party. I think it's a good place to learn because the Chinese Communist Party had a red army the same way the NRM has its UPDF. And at the end of Mao's reign, the Communist Party realized that the Red Army had actually eaten the Communist Party and eaten at the political order, and they did away with it and decided to reorganize their politics through the political realm. So maybe the NRM...
And also think of where they are now.
Yes. So maybe the NRM needs to have this conversation. I mean, if you have a caucus meeting on Monday, you can say, can we pause for 30 minutes and actually have this conversation? Can the High Command and Defense Council, the UPDF
you
come?
You want to go to this microphone and are you telling the public that the UPDF is property of the NRM?
They appropriated it.
Abdu, they are democratic aspirations.
In the law, it's not, but it
they are
is
democratic
theirs in
aspirations. But to be fair, the UPDF has not yet shared all aspects of it being the NRA. It's still a very...
No.
Yes.
Why? Let's ask the senior lawyer, senior counsel. Honorable Abdul Katuntu, do you, from deep down your heart, believe that the army does not belong to NRM?
It shouldn't, because the law says so. And I'm here. And let me tell you, I can't sit here. Yeah, because you say this UPDF is established under the 1995 Constitution.
Even the Constitution.
And even the name changed. Why did the name change from NRA to UPDF? Because it was doing exactly what Raymond is talking about, shedding off that partisanship, that history. So look here, we now have a national army, two governed by the Constitution and the rules, national rules, and not party rules. So really, to me, this is how I want to look at it. That this, and that's what I demand.
But the law,
that's what I demand,
yes,
and I have all the right to say, look here. As far as I know, according to the new constitutional order, starting in 1995, the UPDF is a national army, which all of us should be proud of, and not a partisan army. And whatever partisan things they are doing is unconstitutional, it is illegal, and we have to point it out.
I think that the law...
I should tell my listeners to be educated in a manner by which Abdu answers questions. So I hope you take it up.
He has answered it very well.
With real anger.
The question you asked,
because I want the law.
You asked him whether he believes deep in his heart that UPDF does not belong to NRM, and he said it shouldn't. Yeah. So which he asked the other answer. Yes, the answer was
that is an aspirational answer.
Raymond, finish off your 2 minutes. We'll have a break, and then Joseph, and then Emmanuel Domo, and because I want to start with NRM things.
Yeah, so for me, for example, I come from Toro, and many Toro officers who are members of UNLF AD chose not to fight the NRA. They chose to accept it immediately and enter concession with it and became members of the NRA.
Disaster.
Sometimes, consequently, members of the UPDF, and then they were rationed down and removed from the army. These are the people that Katuntu says are getting 3,000. So their political realities of the day. There's the law, for example, that says borders should not ride on pavements. But the political reality of Kampala is that borders are on pavements. And to enforce the law creates a relationship.
Speed fines will not cut
it creates a relationship between the borders and the law. And every time, every time,
that's what you are telling me, because they are riding on the pavement.
Unfortunately,
by the way, border is okay. They are pavement riders.
Let me just finish this point.
Because
unfortunately, in Uganda, every time the relationship between the law and the army has come into question, the violence of the day has won. I've just told you the GSU in 1969, Obote's assassination attempt. The following day, you had a different army from what people thought was the Ugandan army. There were now officers who had been brought into the corps that previously were not. UPC mobilized UPC wingers and brought them into the army. The army overnight came from 40,000 to 150,000. And you had these people deployed on the streets, deployed on the roads to enforce order. So those things, those are the political realities of the day. That if we insist that the constitution says the army is below the constitution, it's very likely we can become a military dictatorship.
Yeah.
So can we have an actual political conversation and say, you officers of the UPDF, where do you want to stop in the politics of Uganda? And then we civilians also tell them where we think they should stop and maybe come to a compromise and live with a compromise.
Well spoken, Raymond. Some of the things Joseph doesn't like. So we're going to stop for a break. After the break, we'll have Joseph here, and then on to
The Capital Gang on 91.3 Capital FM. It's the ultimate rough cut show in the land and beyond. The Rough Cuts.
And together we live forever.
It's a wonderful thing. Your mind at rest. You wanna try your best. Prepare a place in your heart.
Feeding your soul with nothing but hit music. Hit music. Feel good music.
Am I really hearing you?
Rough Cuts. Fresh hits for Uganda. Capital FM. DJ Yowie.
I am a warrior fighting for peace.
DJ Yowie.
I am a warrior.
Every Saturday from 12 p.m. on Capital FM.
People, omukulu n'omuto sagala sawuli de Saturday day. Grab your kit, grab your shoes, because we are running.
Crosses the line.
Running for what? To uplift rural coffee women out of poverty. Where? At the Coffee Marathon in Tungamo on the 24th of May. Are you ready to step up to the challenge? Jango Gireba Mama Mafe. And if running is not your thing, you can show up for the vibes. As we close the day at the Coffee Concert with live performances from Diamond Platnumz, Sister Charity, and Ray G. Visit www.coffeemarathonug.com to register now for just 30,000 shillings. Your fee includes a marathon kit and full access to the concert. The Coffee Marathon, uplifting rural coffee women out of poverty. Brought to you by Inspire Africa Group.
The Capital Gang on 91.3 Capital FM.
Welcome back from the break. More discussion in the break. Abdul Angelo is still with you, says the answer is yes. UPDF is the property of the NRM. Yeah. Abdul is trading in a necessary fiction. The question is whether the NRM represents national interests or sectional interests.
I totally disagree. Anybody who says a constitution is a fiction. Constitution is not a novel. I think my brother Angelo, hold on, my brother Angelo is used to reading novels and fictional novels. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda is beyond a novel.
Let me tell you what Nora says. Nora Oraga says, thank you, Honorable Abdu Katonto. Just because they treat it that way, i.e. that they own it, should not be normalized. It was an excellent response. Let's discuss how they are in violation of the law, not normalizing that Amaje is theirs. Joseph, your own microphone.
I agree with Nora.
Conclude with this topic with Honorable Dombo.
No, I think, unfortunately, Abdu's position makes absolute sense because I totally understand it, except it comes purely from an aspirational perspective and nothing else. No, and unfortunately worse, the commander-in-chief and his family take this army as their personal property. And I was trying to give you historical context, so that's why I took you to the 1980s position. And to them, it was an aspiration for which they have been lucky that the reality has been achieved. But very quickly, look, this depoliticization process that Raymond raised is actually important. And it can be done. You'll be surprised, and Mr. Museveni should listen to this. In the early 90s, again, I was amongst those, together with the other leaders of Uganda People's Congress, who were deliberately facing the reality that NRA had come in and they're occupying the Republic of Uganda. And those men and women who are now part of the NRA, we're not going to wash them away, to use Raymond's word. What do? We were saying that, look, these guys need to be trimmed. The little boys and girls who had been abused should be taken back to school and their welfare catered for. And that we have a small army trimmed enough to defend our national independence and territorial integrity, and not to become the destabilization force that it became. So we had huge goodwill that invest in this army, invest in the size and capacity that is actually sensible, and one for defending our country. I'm just repeating that deliberately, rather than a personal army and a force designed to destabilize and to serve a particular individual interest. If that you can do, even if it was an NRA army, you create a group of men and women who see the nation state first. Unfortunately, I think that's far, considering the manner in which Mr. Museveni's son is behaving rather recklessly on X. It continues to be, unfortunately, a very difficult job to move that away from the original object to the national object, for which all of us want to be able to embrace and say that, look, we have a national army whose job it is to defend our national borders and territorial integrity and our security. I want to say this on the court-martial thing, that unfortunately, again, regardless of the very many aspects of the legislation being proposed, and many of them are reasonably good things, unfortunately, the court-martial element, in my opinion, is at the core, and the majority of the citizens believe is at the core. Another element of that was the attempted justification using Karamoja and the Koromojong, to justify trial of civilians in military court. I find it insulting, and I've repeated that again and again. Absolutely insulting. The Karamoja question: if you've got a decent nation state and a democracy alleged that has been around for the last 40 years, and you cannot deal with cattle rustling except through military courts, that means actually generally you failed. And for Karamoja, a country that needs investment in education, investment in health, investment in infrastructure, investment taking back their gold rather than stealing their cattle and land, which is being done at the moment by NRA, I think that's a wrong example to be used. Finally, I was in Mbale 2 months ago to attend the burial of Mrs. Wakoli, the wife of the late Minister Joshua Wakoli, who disappeared in 1972 and was actually killed by Idi Amin. I'm repeating that because I also say that my area MP, and of course Ibrahim talk about his family that has disappeared. So the history of this, my late MP, I repeat this here, James Ochola, his remains too has never been found. Likewise, many families will talk about this. I don't think that from these histories, people who died in vain and Amin's time, we can look back and say we don't have lessons to learn, and we continue making these repeats again and again. This politics of torture and disappearances. And what I reject is that when it's convenient, we go ahead and go back to UPC times, those other times are happening. And finally, the idea of linking up whatever is attempting to be happening today, which is basically pushing individual interest with the rest of other democracies. Yes, there is no circumstance under which I will support the idea that a civilian qualifies to be tried in a military court. I am lucky I've gone around the world and I've gone around...
to give you another minute, Joseph, because there's a quote here. There's Raymond who says that Moses is not so reckless because he does not army material, sensitive material. But then the thing to do, you also must be challenged, Joseph. You are the one who keeps bringing up references of UPC in a manner to contextualize. Not particularly to context, but to kind of whitewash that period. And that's why, every time that's when people jump in. And you should take note of that.
I've taken note of that, and I hope it's neutral in that. But as I said, it should not take away the fact that, well, our historical experiences should be used as lessons for us to build on foundations to go, rather than to justify excesses of an NRA today, 40 years later, which there is no circumstance that any other government would have the kind of privilege that they do have. And finally, this thing about the GSU, I think Abdu will talk about it. GSU is equivalent of ISO and ESO. What is wrong with ISO and ESO? If these guys are doing their jobs and there's some criminals around town, you deal with them, but you deal with them legally and constitutionally. Do what? You take them to the formal court of law, rather than under people's basements and bossed.
Okay, Emmanuel Dombo is having last word on this one. Since you've been outnumbered on the gang, I'll give you extra minutes.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind everybody, our listeners and those present here, that Parliament has got a constitutional duty because we only have one Parliament. And they have to pass laws for the good governance of Uganda. By the time the Supreme Court came up with a judgment, already the UPDF Act, the UPDF Bill, Amendment Bill, was before Parliament. And in your introduction, you talked about the good and the bad. When the President decided to decommission a number of generals, the first phase, he discovered, according to his own confession, that the amount of money a general was going out with as pension and gratuity was so small that it would not even be attractive for anybody to leave the army. And he decided to use his powers and give them ex gratia, which would recognize that. Let me hope that now that we are amending the law, that those injustices within the previous law against the military, when there was the computation of their pension and gratuity, that these ones are going to be considered. So that people who join the army, they do it by choice. And when they leave it, they should live happy like the public servants were. When you look at the current law as is, it was very unfair to the military, and we believe that this amendment which is coming in, it should rectify that, because the military, whereas the civil service members are permanent and pensionable, in the military they are pensionable but they are not permanent. Because in the military, if you have not ascended to a certain rank by a certain age, ordinarily you are required to leave the army. And this favors a person who exits the army, and this amendment should be made to do that. It is also establishing a number of things that is going to ensure that the army is run well and is a professional institution. I've had people really raise a lot of hell about the decision to try the civilians in the court-martial. They should raise this to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court made a decision.
That try civilians.
Yes, that you can. That's a decision of court, like Honorable Katundu told you. Now the issue, Parliament has a responsibility that advisory order by the Supreme Court, how can it be implemented without it being construed to be targeting individuals or particular political parties? Parliament has nothing to do with it. NRM has nothing to do with it. It is a directive of the Supreme Court. And you just have a responsibility that those exceptional circumstances, how do you define them? I mean, how do you define them? Who should qualify and who shouldn't? And that is where the sobriety would be required when discussing and determining who should be tried or who would qualify to go there. But the final one, which I did hint on in the beginning, that the responsibility shifts when the NRM administration, where President Museveni, who is a political contender, is the commander-in-chief with the direct responsibility of maintaining public order, how will his decisions be construed when he brings a law under the Ministry of Defense, where he's the commander-in-chief? And this law is going to control people, including those he's going to compete with. Should he shy away from the responsibility? Should the NRM members shy away from the responsibility of doing their job because of the way the inference is going to be made by those who want to interpret this? The very final one, I want to tell my brother that
yes,
my brother Semuju, that treason is never treason when treason succeeds. When treason succeeds, it becomes a totally different thing. It becomes a government and becomes starts putting laws and frameworks. And the very last one is that let us use common sense to understand that laws are made to enable those in government to implement their vision in order which they see for the people of Uganda. We are just unlucky that in Uganda we don't have direct executive orders required of a president to use executive orders. You have seen how President Trump has reacted. Immediately he became president.
Yeah.
He's given a leeway. So when you are a president, or when you are a leader, or even when Katundu becomes
Biden came in,
when Katundu becomes the president tomorrow, or any other person, you qualify the law to give you the liberty to create law that will enable you to create public order, but also to ensure that the vision that you have for the country is...
Thank you, Honorable Dombo. You have Noah Nyazi, the artist, says the problem at hand is the politicization of the military and militarization of the politics. Over to you, Gang. And then Dr. Henry in the UK even speaks in Luganda, saying, Abdu atubuzabuza. So...
What is that in Runyankore? You got the best man.
I'm not supposed to laugh.
Can you go for a break?
The breaks are done. So, Honorable Dombo.
Answer his question. I think people deserve at the very least.
Honorable won an election. It's really good, Abdul, for Honorable to engage in politics. He won it unopposed. Because the way he was elected
publicity secretary.
Publicity secretary, older person, which makes a member of electoral college for MP flag bearer.
But he would be about the most qualified in his village than him.
Probably.
Is that a compliment to the village or?
So
that is near my home, you know.
I want to start with him. So what are these elections for? What elections are you conducting?
First and foremost, congratulations. I want to congratulate my dear brother Ofono Opondo, somebody who has spoken for this government for over 25 years.
He should be rewarded.
He should be rewarded or recognized. And I want to thank the people of Mlanda, and specifically his sub-county, I don't know which it is. Because yesterday we were conducting the elections for the sub-county structures of the national resistance movement. Our listeners should know that NRM should have gone to the elections previously, but because of COVID, we only conducted elections for certain leadership positions, but used the law to extend the administration of the structures of NRM and other political parties because they could not convene to elect their leaders. This is something which partially affected us, especially our youth league. We have had the youth league led by people who are no longer youth, and we have had many young people who aspire to join NRM and take up leadership who are not who are being disenfranchised because of what was happening. I want to thank the structure and the leadership of the party which has enabled us, one, to construct a register for the National Resistance Movement, membership register, but also voters register. but also the decision to hold the structure elections for the leadership of the party. The public should know that NRM in the 72,000 villages of Uganda, on the 60th of May, we conducted an election which gave us a result of having 30 leaders elected to lead the national resistance movement. We also conducted primaries for the LC1 flag bearers, those who will hold the flag for NRM, if there will still be NRM at that time anyway, because people either join or leave the party. You join or leave the party. When Justice Byabakama decides to conduct, the Electoral Commission decides to conduct the elections for the LC1 in the country, we have had a very successful exercise. We started with the villages, and last week we are conducting elections for the parish, where we have elected the leaders at the parish. The 30 who are elected in the village become members of the parish council, and all the 30 within the village, including the political leaders who are flag bearers, constitute what is called the parish council, and they elect the 30 who go to the sub-county. These are the ones who convened yesterday to conduct the elections for the sub-county executives. These elections were very hot, they were very competitive, and now we have members who are going to constitute the district conference at the end of this month, when they sit constitute a district conference, and they elect the district executive of the NRM, and also delegates, some of the delegates who will be part of the national conference when it is convened by the national chairman.
First stop here. I want to give everyone 2 minutes, then give you last word because we are out of time.
Are you sure?
Beginning with you, Raymond.
I was just beginning.
The crisis with the NRM.
Go on, Raymond. I don't have a question to ask you. It's a response to Emmanuel Dombo.
I think there are three things that emerge from that election. And for me, I think it's been the contention that the NRM is a mass party. Whether it's popular is another question altogether. But I think the demonstration remains that the NRM is a mass party. And other political players have to contend with that fact, that it being unpopular may not necessarily mean that it's not a mass party. And many people still see their vehicle towards political leadership coming through the NRM, even though they would have patently belonged elsewhere. Number two, it also rang for me a huge contradiction, because members of the NRM seem indifferent to the other political players in the system. Other political players, Honorable Semu Junganda here, has been trooping to the Electoral Commission almost once every week to demand, can we have our party registered? Can we be allowed to hold our party elections? So it rang a contradiction for me on the NRM to say...
Is there a kind of hubris?
It's a hubris, but it's a dangerous hubris to have, because if these things happen to the NRM, you need people like Samuju to fight for you. If, for example, Samuju tomorrow turns out as the Justice and Constitutional Affairs Minister in the PFF government, you need him to say the NRM should be able to have their mass elections in every village as and when they wish. So that contradiction remains. But I think the other final one is to ask what is the direction of this NRM, because now their party chairman is patently old, definitely tired, you can see it, and yet the party tells us there are many young, vibrant, ready individuals to take over the leadership.
They have a CDF who does not believe in all that chain of...
And CDF who is also a member of the NRM, because at the party register it was confirmed that he's a voting member of the NRM cell in the village in Russia. So we need the NRM to be ready for that.
Joseph, your 2 minutes.
Did you say CDF is a member of NRM? Is he a member of NRM?
The document show.
Isn't he?
Joseph, you only have 2 minutes.
Isn't he supposed to be non-partisan? And in any case, isn't he also the chairman of a particular organization called PLU, something like that?
The pressure group. That's
okay.
By the way, social media is murdering you today. You will just go through the process.
Okay, we're used to that. Starting with the 60s, trying to secure our nation state. In the 80s, trying to check ourselves against what we knew would be an excess around NRA.
On Emmanuel Dombo's submissions, now you are left to the minutes.
But congratulations to Ojamu Pondo in Segere. But Emmanuel is mobilizing to Segere, indeed, yes. Emmanuel is mobilizing. They're mobilizing themselves to prepare themselves for the next election because they saw the shock actually in 2001. And actually, what the NRA guys are doing are actually quite smart. They've been woken up, and I think this credit we should give to NUP, knowing that if they don't do these things and plan early enough to establish themselves, they'll be taken by a shocker. And of course, privilege, they've got the time, they've got the advantage, they've got our national resources to be able to mobilize and organize. Nobody's stopping them anywhere across the country.
Honorable Semuju, your 2 minutes.
I grew up under the UPC government.
That's why you're very.
And we used to line up the roads as they were going to Bushenyi. The UPC T-shirts and everything, they had the capacity to distribute campaign materials to the whole country.
Not from public money.
They may not have abused the state to the levels of NRM. So the NRM should be judged in that context. You're dealing with a state party. If you look, I made a response to the budget. Today, the president has 650-something RDCs, each with a brand new pickup.
Many of them are resigning to ready themselves.
It's just a few. It's just a few, but others will be appointed. If you look at the staff of the office of the president, including State House, political mobilizers. So in the public service now, we have a job called the political mobilizer under State House. They are about 70. You have presidential assistant on political. I mean, that's how the Butcherman and Catherine Kusasira.
So where are you going with this in relation to?
So there is no part called NRM that we should waste our time discussing. You just talk about the government of Uganda. Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who heads the army, has said, you opposition, we are going to beat you. For us, we are Tutsi. And I like Muhoozi. He doesn't speak, he doesn't hide, he doesn't pretend. He says, you opposition, we are going to beat you. You will know that we are Tutsi. Okay. So, Ofono Opondo, I want Ofono Opondo to succeed. First of all, there is no opposition party that has a chance to compete under the special interest group. The first special interest group is UPDF, 10 MPs. Their election is presided over by M7, the chief of military intelligence. They have now changed them, the chief of personnel. They generate a list. It goes to the president, and then he reduces it. Then he will go and address them, then they elect. That's the first special interest group. The one of Ofono Opondo.
Yeah.
It is also all the MPs representing other persons are all NRM. So this special interest group is one way of NRM doing what UPC used to do, gerrymandering.
Honorable Katuntu, your 2 minutes.
Abdu's looking at me.
You've spoiled my evening by your last statement.
Well, you're going to first start to the afternoon. We are 2 minutes to the afternoon.
Yeah, but the whole evening is gone, you know. Anyway, I don't know whether I should congratulate the NRM
or
first of all, I congratulate him. I think if he eventually succeeds, like I think he will, he could be a value addition to Parliament. I don't think he's a guy, they will have known him right from school, who is a straight jacket fellow that they'll come, tell him do this, and so on. Many moments he's going to speak his mind. And you see, the older you get, the wiser you become. Because he's not looking for any other job after his tenure in Parliament. So really, to me, he's going to be a dividend to that institution.
Okay.
Having said that, I followed keenly, especially in my constituency, what was going on in the NRM. What do you call them? What? Structure elections, and eventually I talked to many of my other colleagues. What is interesting is that all these elections were managed and supervised by the office of the RDC and the district internal security organization. Yeah. So, and that's the sort of complaint we've been having of having a fusion of the state structures and the party. And if you think, the Honorable Dombo, that is good for your party, in the longer run,
there's a challenge. Let's give a minute left to Honorable Dombo.
But I think Honorable Katuntu is old and he should be able to know that is happening in every country. There are political offices, even in the USA, where the president appoints them. They are public servants, but they are political. When Joe Biden lost the elections, we
don't have time.
Absolutely. ISO is a political office. The people occupying those offices, that's why they don't come to Parliament for approval.
They are political functions.
Do you approve them in Parliament? Absolutely, yes. That is why I'm telling you that their appointment, you even don't know how they are appointed and who qualifies. That's why it makes them political.
In conclusion, Honorable Dombo, you have just half a minute left. His microphone is not on, Honorable Dombo. You conclude your minute.
It is a statutory organization, but the occupants of those offices are political. Whether you like it, this is the reality.
Honorable Dombo, give your final sentence. You're the only one on microphone.
This is the reality which I'm telling you. This is the reality which I'm telling you. You may take it or leave it, but that's a fact.
Yeah. You're only one on microphone. And give your final sentence.
And the final thing is that I'm calling on the members of the public, and especially the NRM, that let us participate in the remaining exercises. And I want to thank those who participated in the update of the registers. Right now, we're on the final stages of working on the NRM register so that we can deliver qualitative elections during the NRM primaries.
Thank you so much, Honorable Dombo. Next, Capital Radio has Rough Cuts with DJ Nyowe. The way Dombo speaks, he cannot even have a hecklers going through because we're out of time. Thank you, Star Cafe, for your food, for the powering the gang. They've been very, very strong. Honorable Katuntu, thank you. Honorable Semuju, thank you. Honorable Dombo, thank you. Soon to be Honorable Joseph Ocheno, thank you. Raymond Mujuni, thank you. I am Oscar Semoyam Soke, and I shall see you next week.
91.3